My name is Lucius Clifton Sloan, Sr., but I've been known all my life as just L.C. Sloan, and that's the way I prefer it. I was born and raised in Gainesville, Georgia, which is a little city about 55 miles north of Atlanta. And my father was Journey Cooper Sloan, and my mother's name was Mary Adeline Williams Sloan. They had 7 children, and I was the younger of those 7. I graduated from Gainesville High School in the spring. I'm not sure when they have the graduation, but in the spring of 1941. I did not go to college, but got a job with the Western Union office in Gainesville. And I stayed with them as a teletype operator and a desk clerk or whatever they needed. In January 1942, the Western Union transferred me from Gainesville to Western Union office in Charleston. So I worked there for probably about a year and got a job at the Navy Yard, which they paid a good bit more than Western Union. So at the Navy Yard as a teletype operator. And I was talking to somebody on the teletype machine one day, and it happened to be Mildred. She was working with the 6th Naval District headquarters, which had taken over the Fort Sumter Hotel downtown. So me being with the Navy Yard and her being with the 6th Naval District, we had connections with the teletype. So we talked on the teletype off and on, and finally made arrangements to meet. So she told me what time she got off from the Fort Sumter Hotel, and I said, well, I don't know what you looked like, but I went down there, and as those girls started coming out, I just hollered her name, and she identified herself. So from there on, we've been together. April 1943, I was drafted into the Army from Charleston, but not having a permanent Charleston address, they list me as being from Georgia, which was okay with me. But anyway, I went to Columbia, and then they assigned me to the 66th Infantry Division, which was just forming then in Camp Blanding, Florida. So I went there first, and we trained for a few months, and then we pulled up and went to Camp Robinson in Little Rock, Arkansas, where the snow was at that time. So we'd been in the heat, and now they were taking us into the snow. So we stayed in Camp Robinson. I can't remember all these months and things, but stayed in there a few months, and then they pulled up and we went to Camp Brooker, Alabama, which is southern Alabama almost. And there they taught us how to swim and different things like that. So I said, well, I reckon we're getting ready to go overseas there. This is, a good while that we had been in training and here in the States, and wondering what we were going to do. We just moved from one place to another and continue with the same training and everything. So this was 1944, probably around November, someplace like that. They loaded us all up and we were going overseas. So we landed in England about that time, about November of 44. So we still didn't know where we were headed. But on Christmas Eve, 1944, we loaded on ships to go across the channel. Unfortunately, one of our ships was torpedoed, and a good many of our infantry, the regiments, were drowned. Was it something they didn't really expect? I don't think something they hadn't prepared for. And this was a Belgian ship. This is what we understand later. This was a Belgian ship that the British had basically rented from the Belgians to haul our soldiers across the bay. We didn't know, the rest of us that survived, I don't think we knew what was happening with our other regiments. And so when we got on unloaded in France, Cherbourg, around there, we loaded up on trucks and headed to southern France. Now, we learned later, and I'm not sure how we learned it, that we were really heading for the Battle of the Bulge when we were loading up in the ships and going over that. We were, if you remember the Battle of the Bulge, that was a vicious conflict that we had with the Germans. We learned that that was our destination, but because we had lost so many of our regimental people, you know, that they couldn't send us up there shorthanded, basically. So what they did, they sent us to southern France, where the 94th Division had been left there by Patton, I think, when he was coming up from Italy and was going from through southern France. He had left his 94th Division in southern France to encircle. They had the sub-pens at Saint-Nazaire and Lorient and area surrounding that. They had the Germans encircled there, so he was just going to hold them, you know, hold them in the pocket. So what happened is that since we were under strength, they sent us to Saint-Nazaire and Lorient and took the 94th and sent them to the Battle of the Bulge. So we remained there. Of course, the infantry and all was always, there's always some shooting going on, but I was being in the headquarters part with the teletype, the communications and all that. I really didn't get into any battles with anybody, you know. But we stayed there until the end of the hostilities were, you know, declared over, or the Germans surrendered and everything. So they sent us to Germany, and we were bivouacked in Niedermendig, Neidermendig, Niedermendig, Germany, and we were going to be part of the occupation. Well, I don't think we were there but about 10 days. And so they pulled us all out and sent us back down to basically southern France. And we were going to set up a staging area there to basically ship the European theater soldiers to the Pacific, since the fighting was over there. So we were going to operate that staging area. And we had the communications set up for all of that. And I got some statistics about the number of phone calls and messages and things that went out daily and everything, but I can't remember all those. Okay, so we stayed in that location until, that they had shipped to the Pacific I guess the number of soldiers that they needed. From there, we went to Salzburg, Austria, as part of the occupation. I got into that about sometime in October 1945, and that was a blast. The Army had taken over all these ski resorts up in the mountains, so on a weekend they'd load up a bus to take us up there and teach these old Southerners how to ski. I don't think they were too successful at it, but we enjoyed trying anyway. But stayed, as far as myself, I was in Salzburg from October of '45 until you got enough points and time and everything to be sent back to home. So in April of 1946, I shipped back home and was discharged, and went right straight to her house. The French people were exceptionally nice to us because, after all, we had liberated them from the German occupation, and they treat us extremely well. And some of my photographs I show, I have them with some of the French girls and families and things. I think my thoughts would run along with everyone else that this was if I had enough opinion about things, a dastardly act, and we certainly should respond in kind. I knew that the government was going to respond in some way, and I probably would be involved if it lasted long enough, in which it did. I didn't look forward to it, no. Since it's over, I'm glad that I could be involved with it. If I was a doughboy slugging in the mud and firing rifles at everybody that come along, I don't know how I would have felt about it, but basically, I mean, I didn't have a hard time, but if you do what you're told, you get along pretty good in the Army. But it was an experience, and I'm not sorry that I had the experience. I don't say I would want to go through it again, not at my age anyway. But it was hard being away from my family and especially her. Well, she wrote me every day, and she's got every letter I ever wrote. She's got all of them. Of course, I couldn't save them, but she's got every one that I wrote her, and she sent me a package of goodies just about every week, and all the fellows in my company always wanted to go to mail call with me because they knew I was going to get a package of goodies from home. But it wasn't from home, it was from her. The roughest part, of course, it's rough being away from my family, but understand, I had already left my family and moved to Charleston. So after Mildred and I met and fell in love, it was terribly hard to leave her. That was the hardest part of it, is to leave her. When I on a furlough and I had to go to see my family, my mother and father-in-law, but I wanted to see her too, and she wanted to see me. So she loaded up on a bus, probably in Georgetown, and came on that bus, I'm sure it was 12 hours, but she stood all the way because there wasn't any seats when she got home. I stood up all the way for that time. So that's asking a little bit of him, but I didn't ask of it. She just gave. Wasn't too many months after we met that I had to go. So I was 3 years there. Went in April of '43 and was discharged in April of '46. So that was three years that we were parted. I stopped at her home before I ever went any further than that. But it was something else. Can't hardly describe it. We were married on July the 31st of that year, 1946. We've been married 61 years this last July. My experiences weren't too exciting and weren't too dangerous. Was always at a headquarters and operating communications, a telephone and teletype. The only time I almost got shot was when we were in southern France for like Saint Nazaire and Lorient. We had a little headquarters set up at a little town called Plouay, Plouay, I think, Plouay. And we had a tent set up with our teletype machine and everything in it. This was pretty close to where the general had his quarters, but they were in a bunker under the ground, see. And of course, our soldiers and the German soldiers were always fighting back and forth a little bit. But a bullet came through that tent where I was sitting and landed in the floor just beside me. Went into that floor about a half an inch anyway. And I thought, Lord, help me if I'd been sitting 6 inches this way or that way, whichever way it came in. I don't remember. It hit me right in the head. Then it would have been well, I'm sure it would have killed me. But that's the closest I ever come to getting shot. being a teletype operator, I was the first one to, in our area anyway, in our division there, because the general had a bunker not too far from us. And so they told me one day, said, get everybody away from the machine, because we're going to send a message, and nobody can read that, except, of course, you will, but you take it directly to the general. So, and it was a message saying that the Germans had surrendered, and that it was the end of hostilities for us. So I was happy to take it to the general.